What's up, Who Dat Nation? And welcome into Saints Daily, your home for everything to do with the black and gold. My name is Tim, and let's jump right into the history of Pick 8 since 2016. Pick 8 is actually one of those picks that, if you look back on, especially in recent memory, is a relatively successful pick for teams to be drafting at. There's a lot of reasons behind this, and I want to go over the last 10 years of draft picks at this position. But I think one of the main reasons why this pick has been so historically successful is because positional value seems to really fall with this pick. It doesn't seem like teams are reaching for the top pass rusher, the top quarterback for the most part. This pick seems to be where best player available kind of just hits. And it's a few reasons behind it, right? If you're picking at number 8, you're not a good team. You have probably a lot of holes on your team. Unless you have pick 8 from trade, you're probably deserving to have pick 8. Obviously, there's outliers, injury seasons happen. You think of like a 49ers or the Chiefs of last year, where injuries were more of the story than anything. But if you look historically, in 2016, Jack Conklin, the tackle, was drafted by the Tennessee Titans. Then you have Christian McCaffrey, Roquan Smith, TJ Hawkinson, Isaiah Simmons, JC Horn, and that brings us to 2021. And the 2021 all the way to 2025 has one similar theme, and 2026 will fit it. Drake London in 2022, Bijan Robinson in 2023, Michael Penix in 2024, and then Teteroa McMillan in 2025. Since 2021, the NFC South has owned pick 8. It is either the Falcons or the Panthers, and now the New Orleans Saints are going to be selecting 2026. Historically, though, those names that I just listed off, the only ones that you can look at and say did not live up to that draft position yet, it's still early on in a lot of these players' careers. Michael Penix seems to maybe not be a hit at quarterback. And then you have Isaiah Simmons, who was that hybrid linebacker, safety, slot corner that a lot of teams kind of seem to covet nowadays. I think he might have been 5 years too early with what he is as a player and what the NFL was doing back then to what they're doing now. Think of, the Sonny Styles type of linebacker, where former safety, now linebacker. Isaiah Simmons, very similar type of build, type of player. I think Sonny Styles is set up for a lot more success with just the way that everything seems to go in terms of the NFL and the coming back to the pass slash, the play action pass, um Kyle Shanahan scheme, two high safeties, more run heavy. This is kind of what you would expect that position to have a lot more success in, rather than the spread offense that the 2020 season that Isaiah Simmons was drafted in. Isaiah Simmons is now on the Panthers, drafted by the Cardinals. So you want to take it back another year to the pick number 8 dominance of the NFC South. That does obviously play into it. Obviously, one of the other things to look at, two of the best running backs in the NFL today are pick 8 players. You have Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson. Obviously, the Saints did go out and get Travis Achan, so them drafting a player like Jeremiah Love might not be in the cards at this point. I don't think he's off the draft board, depending on how everything falls. If he's there at 8, that means that that's because a lot of players were picked ahead of him that maybe weren't expected to go ahead of him, and he might be the best player available. At that point, do the Saints trade down? Do they just say, "Hey, this is the best guy that we have, and we want to go with this specific running back, this kind of backfield where we're going to split carries"? And what does that mean for Alvin Kamara? Obviously, that's a whole story in and of itself that I don't want to get into. But the thing that I do want to get into again is not just the players, but the positions. Because, like I said, this pick seems to be different. It doesn't seem to be linemen, pass rushers, trench players, quarterbacks. This is essentially where all those players that are the positional value picks or the top 2 to 3 player picks are taken, and then all of a sudden now you're going for just who is the best player left on the board. On offense, 7 players out of the last 10 years were offensive players. 6 were skill position players. The only one that was not a skill position player was Jack Conklin, the tackle by the Tennessee Titans. He had a relatively good career, sorry, with the Titans. He had a few injuries that kind of affected his ability, and now he is on the Browns. Maybe he'll be able to bounce back, but again, still a relatively good player. The 6 other players, were either quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. These are players that, again, maybe don't have the highest positional value, minus quarterback and wide receiver, but you do have the ability to get that tight end there. You do have the ability to get that running back that's going to be a player that you don't need to ever focus on that position, hopefully, in the future. TJ Hawkinson, the great tight end, he did end up getting traded, but for a while there, you don't have to worry about tight end because you picked someone at 8 and he was worth the pick. Defensively, you have your linebacker safety hybrid in your Isaiah Simmons, and then you have the cornerback and J.C. Horn. So again, if the Saints decide to go corner at this pick, a very interesting selection because you have that ability to look back on the history of this pick and see, all right, we have one in the last 10 years. And outside of injuries, J.C. Horn is a fantastic player. When he's on the field, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and his contract deservedly represents that. Then you have the other linebacker in Roquan Smith, who is another fantastic player in the NFL. So very excited about pick 8. I think this is a very good situation, and the more you're looking at mock drafts, the more you realize that this might be a good spot for the Saints because you let the board ahead of you dictate a few things for you, and you're probably happy with 2 to 3 players that fall to you at 8. Up next, I want to talk about how the Saints have now brought in another wide receiver for top 30. This is clearly a position that this team is doing their homework on in this draft. This is clearly a position that most experts, everybody agrees, does need to be focused on in this draft. There is probably something that needs to happen at wide receiver before you head into next year. Now, I'm on record thinking that the wide receiver room is maybe not as bad as people make it out to be. I think that you have a good one receiver in Chris Olave, and I really have a lot of faith and hope that Vele can be a good, solid number 2. You would love it if Vele was your number 3, but behind Vele is a mishmash of question marks. So my opinion on this position is draft it if it makes sense to do so. Make sure you're doing your homework. Make sure you're following up on every single player. Pick 8, second round, whatever it might be, to get somebody else in the building, but don't force it. There are still some decent free agents left. Some of them come with character concerns, so you're obviously gonna have to with the Tyreek Hills and Stephon Diggs, you're gonna have to really do your homework, make sure that in the legal sense that these players are okay, but also that it makes sense to bring those kinds of players into a locker room where you have a second year quarterback as your starter, right? And for the Patriots, that worked out great last year with Stephon Diggs. But going back to Jordan Tyson, some information on him for people who don't really know the player as much. He's a really big target, 6'2", 203 pounds. When you watch his tape, his route running is pretty good. It's not Carnell Tate level, but it's really solid. It's someone who it looks like he's open more often than not. So he does do a good job getting open. He does do a good job making sure that he is available for the quarterback. You have questions about him being able to play in the slot because he does have an extensive injury history. In 2022, he was on Colorado. He ended his season by tearing his ACL, MCL, and PCL. So basically, anything and everything in the knee was torn. 2023 was kind of a weird red shirt year. He didn't really get much play time back in 2024 when he was back on the field. He ended up missing the Big 12 championship game and the playoff quarterfinals, I believe, is how far that team got because of a broken collarbone. So bone breaks maybe a little bit less concerning than anything with like an ACL or what happened last year where he missed 4 games with a hamstring. So anything soft tissue, that's the stuff that's a little bit more recurring, a little bit scarier whenever you're looking at players and their longevity. Now, think of a Kendre Miller, where this guy is when he is on the field in practice and whenever he is available, he has that potential to be a game breaker, but there always just seems to be a soft tissue injury. Having multiple hamstring injuries, it was both hamstrings that got hurt last year, is a little concerning. You got to make sure you're taking care of your body. Obviously, the best ability is availability, all that kind of just phrasing that people use to really express how important it is to make sure that a player can just play 16, 17 games a season. It is a concern. It's the only reason why Jordan Tyson would even be available at pick 8. If you look at him when he is on the field, he is one of the best wide receiving prospects to come out in any draft in the past probably 5 years. He has all the talent in the world, but he does have a lot of injury concerns. So I don't know if this is something that the Saints should be putting their eggs in this basket for. I love the player when he's on the field. I think he has a lot of ability that not any other wide receiver in this class has. He is by far and away the most talented wide receiver in this class, in my opinion. It's just getting him on the field consistently is unfortunately something that I don't know if you can do whenever you have Jordan Tyson. So at pick 8, I know they're just doing their homework, bringing someone in for a top 30 visit. At pick 8, it's a little rich to me to risk drafting someone with injury concerns to this level, but I wouldn't put it past the Saints. If you think back on Marshawn Lattimore, very similar situation where, hey, this is a guy who has injury concerns, slid in the draft because of it. The Saints got him because of that slide, and he was one of the best corners in the league for years. And the Saints were not regretting that pick at all, and they're not regretting getting out of the Marshawn Lattimore deal and the picks that came in for Marshawn Lattimore. They kind of got that exactly right with Marshawn Lattimore completely. So I don't pretend to be a doctor. I don't pretend to be a scout. So just based off of everything I'm seeing and hearing, he is the best wide receiver in this class, so he might be worth the pick. If he stays healthy, if this was Madden and you could just turn injuries off, you take him at pick 8 and you don't think twice about it. But with the fact that there are injury concerns, you do have to just weigh those options. The one thing that has been said about him, if you listen to the scouts, there was one quote that I heard that really stuck with me, and it's that he is one of the more tough receivers in this class and in a while. The injuries to his hamstring last year, he had to be taken out of those games. He was refusing to leave, right? He hurt both of his hamstrings against Texas Tech. He refused to leave the game, and he basically closed out that game for his team. They ended up winning, I think it was 26-20. He ended up closing out that game for them with two injured hamstrings, and then the coach basically had to put him on the bench because he wanted to play, but the coach basically said, we have to protect him from himself right here. So he has that dog mentality of I want to be on the field, I want to help my guys. He's definitely a team player, which is really helpful and really good to see from anybody, especially at the wide receiver position. So the guy, the player, I love him. Again, it's just the injuries. Like I said, though, this is a position the Saints are doing their homework on. Wide receiver alone at this point in time, Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana, Carnell Tate from Ohio State, Ted Hurst, Georgia State, Mekhi Lemon, USC, Chris Bell from Louisville, and now Jordan Tyson from Arizona State have all been top 30 visits. So definitely doing their homework on wide receivers. Up next, I want to talk about what just came out over the weekend on Ruben Bain Jr. and what that might mean for his draft stock. Unfortunately, it's not a good story to hear. Ruben Bain Jr. has been linked to a March 17th, 2024 car crash where it is coming out that he was the driver, where there was unfortunately a fatality in the car crash. Bain was not tested for any kind of driving under the influence. He was cited for careless driving, but again, there was no sobriety test that was administered to Ruben Bain at the time. Charges were dismissed before the victim passed away, but the victim basically was a 22-year-old woman. She suffered a lot of severe injuries. She was in a coma for 3 months before she passed away. Um, this is coming out from some really good reporting that's been coming through. It wasn't widely reported during that season. Hasn't been reported to what I've seen at all at this point in time during the draft process. So it's really concerning that this is coming out now. And this might be a draft day slide, similar to what you see with Tunsil and Jalen Carter, where both guys were top two, three picks based off of talent, but the fact that they had really bad, incriminating evidence against them. Um, Jalen Carter a little bit more similar in terms of what happened than what Laramie Tunsil had, but this is something that you could see a guy who was potentially a top 10, top 15 pick now maybe slide maybe all the way into the second round. It'll depend to see what happens. I think there's a lot of teams that really might look at this and go, we have the locker room to take care of this. Jalen Carter's already a case study of this is something that is similarly happened with a player that was drafted high and he's succeeding in the NFL. He's playing well. And overall it's not going to be anything that's going to impact his career. It's going to be something that is obviously talked about when you're talking about the player and the team. And it's maybe a reason why, in my opinion, I would not want the Saints to draft this player. You get a reputation when you start drafting players and not caring about stuff like this. And I don't want the Saints to have that reputation. I think in that lull with the Breeze Payton era, where the team was linked to players with some off-field issues and some character concerns, that team was not performing well. The locker room was really kind of caving in on itself. And that's whenever the team parted ways with a lot of players that had character concerns and that were not team players and really shifted their focus to the Demario Davises of the world that are character first guys. And I want to see this team continue with that mindset because at the end of the day, you don't want to draft the player that is going to be suspended or out of the league due to legal issues. So to me, this doesn't make him undraftable, but if he falls out of the first round, second round, he's there in the third round, maybe that's when you start looking at it, but I wouldn't want to see this team take a risk on a player that already had a lot of question marks due to his unique size. He's someone who is an outlier in terms of how short his arms are. And I know that discussion maybe is a little bit more in the spotlight due to Will Campbell's performance in the Super Bowl, the short arms left tackle, right? Ruben Bain having historically short arms at pass rush does kind of seem like it's playing out due to that performance, but again, to me, this doesn't make him completely undraftable. You have to interview the guy, you have to talk to him, you have to figure out what happened. This again is coming out as he there was no field sobriety test. Maybe there's a good reason. Maybe he wasn't under the influence. Maybe it was just a really bad accident that wasn't reported on at the time. And a week before the draft, it just comes out and it's going to ruin his draft stock. But it was a complete accident, and everybody, involved was, following the rules of the road. So you do have to interview the guy, you have to figure out what's going on. But assuming that what has been alluded to of, a DUI that should have been administered but wasn't, makes this guy, in my opinion, close to being undraftable. As always, though, let me know in the comments what you think. Is this something that makes him undraftable in your eyes? Is this something that you are okay with depending on where he would be drafted? Always interested to see what everybody thinks and how you differ from what I'm thinking as well. Finally, more free agent trade news. Kenny Moore, the slot corner on the Indianapolis Colts, has been granted a trade request. So he's now officially able to, the team's actually going to be taking in offers. It's very out and open. So there are teams that are going to be calling in and looking into Kenny Moore. Obviously, when this happens, you always think, okay, how does this affect the team that I'm a fan of? Knowing that the Saints have a hole in their secondary that's the size of Alontae Taylor, this is a player that might make a lot of sense for the Saints. And I want to talk about it a little bit before getting into too much of what a trade might look like and if the Saints should actually seriously consider it. So what we know today is that The Saints did not replace Alontae Taylor after they lost him in free agency. Alontae Taylor played the star role in Brandon Staley's defense, which is that role that Jalen Ramsey played, that Derwin James played, that Brandon Staley gets really creative with. A slot corner or a safety is typically who you're going to put in that role. Brandon Staley has said that he would prefer that position, that person in that position to be a safety. Again, Jalen Ramsey did play it, so he is a corner. Derwin James also played it safety. So it's not unheard of to put a corner there, but there is a preference for the safety. And right now, if you're going to put anybody in that star role that's on the roster today, that would be Justin Blackman, the safety that came over as a free agent last year. Played the star role really well up until he got hurt last year. I think he was 2 games into his Saints career before he got hurt, and he missed the rest of the season. When you look at Kenny Moore, he's known as being a slot corner and a very effective blitzer at the slot position. Look back at what Alontae Taylor did. He was known for being a corner in the slot who also was an excellent blitzer. Kenny Moore is 30 years old, so much more experience than Alontae Taylor had. This would be a veteran that would be coming over. He already has over 100 starts to his name, over 130 total games. He's 5'9", 190, so he's a little bit smaller, but he is very built. He's definitely someone who you're going to trust to make a tackle in open space. He's got 21 interceptions, over 65 pass breakups, and 11 and a half sacks. So again, that's a pretty elite number for a corner, 11 and a half sacks over his 9 seasons. He was a Pro Bowler in 2021. He has had a few injuries. He had an Achilles injury, which is probably why he's available. His role has reduced a little bit over the years as well, but he's still a starter. He's still one of the top corners in the slot. Right now, his contract's about 10 million per year with a $13 million cap for next season. So that's pretty expensive for what the Saints have right now. I think they have about 10 million in cap for free agents, and then the rest would be for their draft class. So you would probably have to figure out how to get him on there. But likely there's only a year left on his deal. So if you do bring him in, you could probably sign him to a 2, 3 year extension. Get that cap hit down. Don't have to add those fake void years, and you can just get fancy with maybe backloading the contract, so that way you can really continue to build out this roster without having to worry about fake years and getting yourself back into that kicking the can down the road situation. It's not a bad idea to bring him in on this team. It brings in veteran leadership. It brings in a guy that's proven and a slot corner that this team is absolutely missing. Most likely, this is a guy or a trade that would need to be happening before the draft because if you're the Colts, you probably want draft compensation this year. If you're going to let go of a player that's slotted to start for you, you're probably going to want to try to get draft compensation, whether to use it to replace him, to draft somebody else, or to trade for a player to replace him. So there's you know a few reasons why this is all stuff that would probably have to happen before the draft. But having that hybrid defensive back, that corner, that blitzing defensive back that is very Alontae Taylor-esque is honestly something I think that this team could do. So if you are going to look into drafting or to trading for him, that trade may end up looking what you saw like a Stephon Gilmore do. It was a fifth round pick for Stephon Gilmore. Veteran corners at that range might be a typical day 3 with a late swap pick. So if you're talking a fourth, a fifth for this guy, I think you do the trade. I don't think you think twice about it. I think you take that and you move on, and you're extremely happy that you have a starter for at least a year at that position. It allows you to be a little bit more free in the draft. It doesn't force a pick. I'm a big Caleb Downs fan, but this also does allow you to go, okay, Caleb Downs is available, but so is Sonny Styles, or somehow Arvell Reese, David Bailey, and we want that positional value player that may be a little bit higher on our personal rankings as well than filling in that star role with Caleb Downs. I would 100% do that if that was the case. If all it takes is a day 3 pick and maybe a late swap, absolutely, I would take Kenny Moore and I wouldn't think twice about it. As always, though, I want to know what you think in the comments below. Please let me know what you think. Is this a player that you want to see the Saints target? Is there any free agents or other players that are rumored to be available that you think the Saints should get, whether it be before the draft or just reevaluate after the draft to see if they're available? Thank you everybody for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please press the subscribe button and drop a like and share with your friends. As always, we'll catch you next time.